February of 2000.
Yes,
Were you living here full time in February?
I was.
Can you tell me about how you ended up in Tampa as of February of 2000?
I lived seasonally for many years, so I was going back and forth to the Boston area, and then I grew up here.
And what changed in February of 2000?
I was here on a work family vacation, and on that particular time I was assaulted by Mr. Lorenzo.
During that visit, did you have contact with Mr. Lorenzo at some point in the month of February?
I did.
Do you recall the exact date?
The exact day, no, but I know it was the third week in February.
And how is it that you came into contact with Mr. Lorenzo?
The day that I arrived, I was here early, so I figured I'd go try to meet up with some friends that I had known over the course of the years.
At that time, did you know the defendant's actual name?
I did not.
Did you know him at all?
Just by appearance, his face.
Had you come into contact with him prior to the third week in February?
No.
Had you seen him out socially prior to then?
Yes.
And is that how you recognized him?
Yes.
Can you tell me what happened and how you came into contact with him that night?
I was sitting at a establishment, and he had come up to me small talk. I moved on to the somewhere down the road, and at each place that I went, he approached with just small talk. And at that time, I told him I was looking for my friends, and he said he knew them, and that was the extent of it.
Did you believe him when he said he knew your friend?
Yes.
Is that based on your prior interactions with him socially?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe not having met him or talked to him, but having seen him speak and talk to the same people that you sometimes talk
Yes,
with.
it was a small group, so he always just seemed to be off into the background.
Do you remember some of the things that you were talking about when you made small talk with the defendant?
The last of the conversation I remember, he said he was in contact with somebody that I was looking for. They were having a get together at their house, and he would show me how to get there. So I followed him.
Did you drive your own vehicle?
I did.
And you followed behind the defendant driving his vehicle? Did you drive directly to the party that you suspected or expected your friends to be at?
No, the stop off there was a parking issue, so one of the cars had to be left. So I was under the impression that he was dropping his car off, and then we would go from there.
You mean a parking issue, not enough space?
Yes,
in
yes.
Tampa. When you dropped his car off, did you all go inside the residence?
We went inside. I believe he mentioned he had to use the restroom. I followed him inside.
Do you know where you made entry? Was it the front door, the back door?
I believe it was the side door that entered through the kitchen.
And where did you go when you entered?
So, as I walked in, if I recall, there was in the kitchen, poured me a glass of wine, and he excused himself. And that's really what I extent of what I remember.
Did you expect to be there long before you arrived? Before you arrived, did you have any kind of conversation with the defendant about engaging in sexual acts?
No.
Did you have any conversations whatsoever with the defendant about engaging in BDSM?
No.
You expected to be stopping off at that residence temporarily before proceeding to a party. You said that you had some of your drink, and that's about the last you remember.
Yes.
Do you remember what kind of drink it was?
It's a glass of red wine.
And was there anything odd about the wine itself?
Yes.
Can you tell me about that?
It tasted a tad funny. I convinced myself that maybe it possibly was corked or turned.
That the wine itself had turned.
Yes.
And how long do you remember after having your first sip of that wine?
It was shortly after. Just my vision became blurry. I felt nauseous. And I believe when I stood up, I wasn't able to. And I believe my limbs, I just couldn't move parts of my body.
Were you conscious at least for some time there in the living room?
Yes.
Before losing
consciousness. Very brief.
And at some point, do you wake up?
When I awoke, at that time I didn't know where I was, but I had duct tape over my eyes and mouth.
And were you in a seated position?
I was face down.
Was there anything else that you could feel, because you could not see, you said you had duct tape over your eyes, could you feel anything else about your body and how you were positioned?
Yes, I was, my arms and my legs were bound, and also twined.
Was that rope or twine around your neck connected to anything else?
My genitals.
And tell me about the restraints on your arms and legs. Were those connected to each other? The bed? What were they connected to?
Honestly, I believe that my legs and my arms were tied together, and also part of it was tied to a part of the bed.
Were you able to move?
Very little, but not, no, almost no.
What is the first thing that you recall when you actually regained consciousness, but the duct tape is still over your eyes?
I was panicked, hysterical. And I remember seeing him sitting, he turned me over and he was sitting on the side of the bed. And I would just recall his face, he didn't look the same. There was nothing behind his eyes were dark, his face was contorted, which further panicked me.
So I want to rewind just a little bit, okay? When you first regained consciousness, is there duct tape over your eyes?
Yes,
Is that at some point removed by the defendant?
yes. And then put back in the beginning, on and off. I went from pleading, which aroused him, and then threatening, and it seemed like that he didn't tolerate that as much as, so we would put that back over my eyes and mouth, so I quickly learned not to threaten him.
So it was throughout the attack that there was duct tape over your eyes,
Over the course of a couple hours.
and was it over your mouth as well?
Yes,
But it was also removed and reapplied.
yes,
So you first regain consciousness and you are on your stomach.
yes,
Does he roll you over?
yes.
Is he saying anything to you?
In the beginning, no, but he let me know that he made other people disappear, and that would be my fate.
He told you that you would disappear. Did he make it an ultimatum? If?
No, I don't believe so. It was, you just simply just stated that. Mostly when I was. I took that as to be quiet, to not say that.
What were you saying back to him?
I went from pleading for him to let me go to insisting that he does. And then I went from that to just being quiet. I realized that when I was quiet that he seemed to lose interest before.
You previously indicated that he was seated on the bed next to you. Is that correct at one point?
Yes.
What was he doing?
The room was dark, but he was, at some point, he was masturbating.
And did he say anything to you while he was doing that?
Well, not most of the time, but that's when he would say that he made other people disappear. He said that several times. That's what stood out. Because I believed him.
How long, if you could approximate, did this go on for?
Hours. I believe from leaving his home to where I ended up was an hour. So I recall the last time I recalled was at midnight. So from midnight to 5 a.m.
We discussed that after you had the wine, you lost consciousness for some time and regained consciousness, and you were already bound. Is that correct?
Yes.
Throughout the entirety of the attack, did you remain conscious, or were there also times that you lost consciousness?
I lost consciousness because he was choking me to unconsciousness.
Was he saying anything then?
Not that I recall.
When you regained consciousness, would he still be in the room?
Yes, he would still seated beside me, masturbating.
Do you know approximately how many times that happened?
Several times.
In addition to strangling you, was he doing other things to your body?
Hitting me, beating me, pinching me, pulling on the whatever he tied me with. I believe it was twine.
And throughout the duration of the attack, at least in the beginning, you were pleading with him? Is that what you said?
Yes, started with hysteria. I was hysterical.
You mentioned when I first asked you about when you realized you were tied up and on the bed, you mentioned that the duct tape had come off and you saw the defendant's eyes.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
There wasn't anything behind them. That's when I gathered that I was in real trouble because he didn't look like the same person. There was just nothing there. Black, emotionless.
Was that for the duration of the assault?
Yes.
Are you aware at any time as to whether you were penetrated during the assault by the defendant?
I don't believe so.
Ultimately, the attack does come to an end.
Yes.
Can you tell me about how that happened?
I'd asked or mentioned that I had used the restroom, so partially untied, followed me in there. When he escorted me back to the bed, I like I said, I was quiet, so I believe he dozed off or lie down. So he didn't completely tie me all the way. I had one hand free, which I managed to get myself out of the rest and slowly found my clothes, got dressed, and walked out.
I apologize.
Fully thinking that I wasn't leaving there. It was like time had stood still, and I thought he would either shoot me or stab me.
Had he threatened to harm you in those ways before you?
Other than telling me that he would make me disappear.
Now, from the time you walked in that side door to the time you walked out of that residence, was there anyone else present other than the defendant, Steven Lorenzo?
No.
Did you hear anyone else other than the defendant?
No.
And you did not see anyone else?
I did not.
Ultimately, you were able to exit the residence?
Yes.
And what did you do when you exited?
I had borrowed my mother's car. I was surprised the keys were in it, and I drove off. Drove home.
Did you report it to the police? Ultimately.
I did.
And is that the last time you ever made contact with the defendant?
No. A couple of years later, somebody had handed me. I had tried to warn as many people as I could after I had called the police, and somebody had handed me a screen name. For whatever reason, I logged it. Maybe another year went by. It was on the computer and it popped up. And
Can I stop you there? When you say you logged it, what does that mean?
At that time, it was AOL was popular. It was they said it was it would be a buddy list, so I logged it on that list, and I was on the computer and it popped up on an instant message.
You mean the system would show you who was online and when?
Yes.
And it popped up that screen name that you had been given by someone else.
Yes.
That was identified to the defendant.
Yes.
Popped up as being online.
Yes.
And what did you do when you saw that?
I sent him a message. I said, between me, you, and God, you know what you did, and you obey.
Did the defendant ever respond?
Yes.
And said what?
I believe he said I was bitter.
Is that the last time you ever had any kind of interaction or contact prior to the defendant's arrest?
Yes, that was the last. Yes, the last.
Your Honor, may I have one moment?
Absolutely.
Mr. Perkins, I understand this happened in 2000. Do you believe that you could identify Steven Lorenzo today?
Absolutely.
Have you had an opportunity during your testimony to look around the well of the courtroom?
I have.
And have you seen Steven Lorenzo in this courtroom?
I do.
Can you point to Mr. Lorenzo and identify him by a piece of clothing?
In a red prison suit, inmate suit.
Your Honor, if the record could reflect that the witnesses identified Mr. Lorenzo,
The record shall so reflect.
is the person that you've just identified the person that attacked and sexually assaulted you in February of 2000?
Yes.
No further questions.
All
Or
right.
pass the witness.
Mr. Lorenzo, do you have any questions of this witness?
Yeah, sure. Mr. Perkins, that's not what you testified at the federal trial. You took this and turned it into something 10 times than what you testified the first time. You're playing victim. That's fine. Are you Tarpon Hottie 29 on the screen name, or were you?
I believe so.
Yes, you sure were. On 12/21.
Mr. Lorenzo, no comments after. You can ask questions, but don't comment on the answers. You ask another question.
Can I have a moment, Judge?
Yes.
You're Tarpon Hottie 29.
I've answered that already.
Yes. In that chat that we had together, did you mention that you were going to visit some of your friends?
No.
Who were the friends that you were going to meet?
Josie and Dwayne.
Do you know who Josie and Dwayne were in the gay community?
As far as
What did they do? Was Josie and Dwayne the main drug dealers for Tampa?
I'm not
Objection,
aware.
Your Honor. Relevance.
I'll overrule as to relevance. I'll allow it. The witness answered he doesn't know. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were you going to an after-hours party with Josie and Dwayne to have a drug party and sex party with the offender?
No.
Did you go to the defendant's house to have sex with the defendant after we did some drugs at the bar?
No.
I have no more further questions. Thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be released by the state
Yes, Your Honor.
and released by the defense? Mr. Lorenzo, may he be released?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. You may step down. You may be released as a witness at this time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to ask the state to please call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, the state would call Jared Paragoy to the witness stand.
And it's standing.
Same, this is a former alleged victim, and same objection, same ruling. I'll allow the witness over the defense objection.